Let's move to another transfer. And I want to say this one comes with a little bit more, we'll call it intrigue, Brian, from you and I. Kane Madden came over from Marshall. He was a second-team All-American at Marshall. He is, slated to potentially be the starting right guard for this Notre Dame team. They went out and picked him up and brought him in, and we assume that they are, why would they not bring him in to be a starter, So he's going to have an impact, whether we think it's going to be positive, negative, or in between. He's going to have an impact on this team. Brian, I'll let you kind of start your thoughts on Kane Madden.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a negative impact. I don't think he's going to be a bad football player. I just don't think he's going to be the guy based on film that he's being made out to be, first team All-American, second team All-American, those kind of things. I think that some of the limitations we saw on film were things that did not expose him, that he was not going to expose him at Marshall against a non-Power 5, all, Sun Belt, Conference USA, whatever league that's in schedule. And I hope I'm wrong, but he is big, size-wise. He's not tall, but he's girth-wise.
Yeah, right.
Very powerful, very fundamentally sound. And the thing I liked about him on film, Vince, which is very important for this football team, is he's very assignment correct. And here's why I say that's important. If you have a player that's physically limited, so let's just say he's not athletic enough to run a lot of outside zones, okay? There's things you can do to protect against that. You can maybe do more pin and pull type of stuff. So, hey, look, he's not a guy that's going to reach a 5 technique on an outside zone. He's not a guy that's going to overtake a 3 technique even, so much less a 5 technique. 3 technique meaning his outside shoulder, 5 technique meaning head up to outside of the tackle. So, okay, so you can't really run that. Okay, so here's what you do. You coach it up and you say, we're going to pin and pull this thing. What that means is you're going to have the tackle down block on the 3 technique, and then Kane can get out and move, and he'll be a little bit more effective that way. There's some things you can do with kick out schemes that you can implement, things that Notre Dame has done that they just haven't done a lot, that when you run to his side, you can use those as opposed to the outside zone. So there's things that you can do to protect him. But if he's assignment correct, it adds to that, because hey, look, whatever we're going to call, we know he's going to execute that effectively. We just got to make sure we call things that he can execute.
That he can do, yeah.
And so that's. But if he was a guy that wasn't necessarily assignment correct, and he was limited athletically, then that would create some problems. So he does bring some value. Now, if I'm wrong about his athleticism, then he'll be very good. That's the thing. If I'm wrong about his footwork, his foot quickness or lack thereof, his agility or lack thereof, then this is going to be a great pickup. If I am right about that, he is going to be limited. Then it's imperative that Jeff Quinn and Tommy Rees make sure that if he is starting, that they're very smart about what they run and don't run. So, for example, you're not going to necessarily you're going to have to alter how you run inside zone, right? So if you're asking him on the backside of inside zone to really have to work to cut off a guy, or outside zone, that's probably not smart. But you know what he can do? He can be at the front of the inside zone, so you run inside zone to him where you're cutting away from him, where now he's power blocking.
He's taking that 3 technique.
Right. Or if some teams like to run to the 1 technique and then cut back to the 3 technique. It just depends on what you like to do. And then there may be some weeks where the looks that they show, you do want to run him back because he can get real good moving. Because here's the thing about Kane Madden. If he gets his hands on you,
done,
and he gets his shoulders on you, he's going to move you now.
I agree with that, yes.
Because he's a big, strong kid. And so those are the things that he brings to the table. So now it comes down to, as a coaching staff, you have to know his limitations, and you have to coach around those, and then coach in a way that accents his strengths. So that's going to be the thing. So when I talk about Kane Madden, and I've been probably more negative than I should have been, meaning I didn't balance that negativity out with the good things that we saw from him. That's on me, but that's my concern, because they're making him out to be something that I just don't see on film.
Yeah.
But good coaching can still utilize a kid like that. Good coaches can utilize a kid like Kane Madden because of those attributes that he does possess. It's just now you have maybe it limits you to where you're not going to run as much pure outside zone as you otherwise would have. So, or maybe you have to change your outside zone to certain looks, where you're going to run outside zone away from him to a 1 technique, because now it's easier for him to have cutoff if he's blocking a 3 technique or up to the linebacker kind of thing. So those are the different things that you have to look at. But if they can utilize his size and strength, Vince, that's certainly going to help this group. And I will say one more thing. I have we got a link to the message board down there, but I have some nuggets, some team nuggets, and this is the kind of stuff that I don't put out a whole lot that I am going to start putting on the message board, because it needs to be, it just needs to be in a place where it's a little bit more secure. But I have some nuggets of what I'm hearing about the offensive line, and one thing I have been told is that yes, they do expect Kane Madden to start because that's why they recruited him, but he's not being handed the starting job, is what I'm told. That he is going to have to battle for that job. And there's some young linemen that are having really good off seasons and some realignment of where some things are going to be. And one thing I will say publicly is I am hearing more and more and more that Jared Patterson is going to be at center, back to center. And so we can get into the ramifications of that. And Vince, you shake your head, and that was my initial reaction. But when I found out what they're doing at the position, it's going to make a lot more sense. And you can see that, you can check that out on the message board. So there are some things that I really like from that, Vince, and some aspects of this move that I really like. And before we kind of finish, Truman, I appreciate Truman DeMel with the super sticker, super chat. I appreciate that very, very much, Truman. Man. That's excellent. Excellent. Really appreciate that. But Vince, that's kind of where I'm seeing he's going to have to win that job, and I don't think it's necessarily a given that it's going to be at right guard, although I hope that that's ultimately what they do, just because I'm a believer in what he can do at that position. So don't teach him to play left-handed if he's been playing right-handed so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, there's a lot of pluses about bringing in Kane Madden. I mean, he's got a lot of experience. Obviously, I would assume that he's got the ability to be a leader in that room, but he doesn't necessarily need to be a leader in that room, because you've got Jarrett Patterson there already. You've got Josh Lugg there already. You've got some guys that
Zeke Krell started at center. Just go play your game.
Right. You got it.
Go play your game.
Yep. And that's so there are some pluses. And like you said, he's strong. There's no question. And I used this term when we were talking about him coming over in the first place, is sphere of influence. If you get inside his phone booth, you're not getting out like that. Yeah. He will move you. There's no question.
He's that heavyweight fighter you want to dance around.
Yes,
exactly. If you get in his uppercut range, you're going down, and that's kind of the equivalent.
And my worries are in space. Obviously, getting up to an athletic linebacker, for example, at the next level, if they ask him to get outside. So, for example, we had a play when I was offensive coordinator. Our 2 guards were both wrestlers, so they had really, really good feet. And we had a sweep play out of 2 backs, out of split backs, where we took both of our guards and we pulled them out in front of that sweep. That's not something that you're going to be asking Kane Madden to do.
Unless it's going to involve a kick out.
Correct.
That's
correct.
The thing.
But he's not going to be out there leading the way down the sideline for a running back, right? Because that's just not – you're not going to put him in a position to do, and ask him to do something that he can't do. So that's the kind of stuff that worries me. But again,
that's okay. That's not something they asked Aaron Banks to do a ton of either.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
And now, look, Aaron Banks to me is a better athlete than Kane Madden for sure. I'm just making the point that they weren't asking Tommy Kramer to do that a ton. And look, I don't think the difference in athleticism between Tommy Kramer and Kane Madden is enormous. But that's also part of the reason Tommy Kramer was more up and down than a lot of the other linemen, because he did have some issues in some of those games against more athletic linemen where he had some props. But let's say this, Vince, when we talk about impact, this is a situation where they need to be right and we need to be wrong.
No question.
And if that is the case, and what I mean by that, not that he's not even have to be a first-team All-American, but if he's just a good, even if it's just an all-conference type of player, a second-team All-ACC caliber of player, that's huge for this offensive line. Because now it's solidified. You have Jarrett Patterson's an All-American at center, in my opinion. Josh Lugg's an experienced guy at right tackle. You have Kane Madden solidifying a guard spot. And then you go in the other guard. Now you know who your left tackle is going to be. Even though he's young, you know who it's going to be. So there's at least some consistency there.
Right.
Now you've got some other guys battling for the other guard spot if Kane Madden wins the other one. And you say, well, you know what? There's a chance you could have 4 guys in the starting lineup that have started games in college. It helps ease some of those things.
Sure. And that goes back to why I talked about the fact that the offensive line, yes, they're replacing 4 out of 5 starters. but there's talent there and there's experience there if it's done the way we think and / hope that it is going to be done. So people can rest a little bit easier, I would say, on the offensive line when we talk about that. But, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, specifically to Caden Madden and then overall to the offensive line. But as the days get closer to fall camp, I feel a little bit better about the offensive line moving forward. It's just, again, a lot of questions to be answered.
I don't feel a lot better about it, Vince, but here's my point. I look at 2018 and I say, is the line going to be worse than that group was? When you look at they lost Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson. Then Alex Bars goes down in game 5. You at one point in time, Tommy Kramer was playing so poorly that you benched him for Trevor Ruland, right? You had 2 first-year starters or first-year players, a redshirt freshman and a true freshman at right tackle. Liam Eichenberg was a first-year starter at left tackle. So it's similar to what we have now. Josh Lugg has a whole lot more experience than any of the tackles they had in 2018, right? No, I'm sorry. You had I'm confusing 27. You had a true sophomore and a redshirt sophomore at right guard and right tackle who played as together in 2017. So they had some experience, but it wasn't a ton. I mean, Tommy Kramer had 9 starts. Robert Hainsey had 4. Neither of them were full. Even though they both played a lot, they were neither full-time starters.
Timeshare. Yeah.
Sam Mustipher took a big step back from 2017 to 2018 because I think he had to worry so much about others around him. I think that hurt his game. And Liam Eichenberg was inconsistent in his career. When Alex Bars went down, that was your only stud on the offensive line. What did Notre Dame do in 2018? It went undefeated. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that was still a really good football team. So to me, it's just the reason I'm still concerned about the line, but the concern is more of what it should be to the expectation of what Notre Dame is supposed to be about. Even if it doesn't play well and it plays like 2018, that was still a top 25 national offensive line. Even though it wasn't top 10 like it's supposed to be, still top 25. They're still going to have a top 25 line this year, even if Cade Madden is exactly what I think he is. They're still going to have a top 25 offensive line. And when you have the talent at quarterback, receiver, tight end, running back, I would argue that we need to see guys step up at receiver. I don't know if there's a Miles Boykin or Chase Claypool, but when you look at the overall talent of the offense and compare it to what it is now, I'll take this 28 group of skill players over the 2018 group of skill players top to bottom, because that year it was really just 3 receivers is all you really had. You had Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, Chris Fink. You had Alize Mack at tight end. Cole Kmet played a little, but not a ton. Brock Wright didn't even play 100 snaps that year. You had good running back situation. We had Jafar Armstrong, who just just moved over from receiver. You had Tony Jones Jr. Dexter Williams missed the first 4 games of the year. I mean, Dexter Williams is a good player. I don't know if I'd say he's better than Kyron Williams. So there was, and who knew what Miles Boykin was going to be going into that year? I mean, nobody knew what he was going to be. Chris Fink was an okay player, a rotation guy, really, is all he was. Miles Boykin had 13 career catches, and like a quarter of them came in the LSU game. We didn't really know what he was going to be. Guys step up. That's the deal. You lost a 1,400-yard rush of the year before. You lost 2 first-team All-American offensive linemen, and you went out the next year, and your football team was even. So that's where I come from. We say, well, why I'm not as concerned about the offensive line being the reason they're going to go 8-4. That's the thing. Is like, oh, the offensive line struggle. They're going to go 8-4. Based on what? Right? Because when they went on 8-4 or 4-8 in the past, it wasn't because of the offensive line. If Notre Dame goes 8-4 this year, it won't be because of the offensive line. It'll be a combination of factors, including the offensive line. But if all the other positions are as good as I think they're going to be in the offensive line struggles, Notre Dame's still going to be at least a 10-2 football team. It may cost them a game or 2, but they're not going to go 8-4 because of it. And so that's where I come from. But at the end of the day, that is also, this puts a lot of pressure on Tommy Rees. Vince, he's got to put together an offense that protects the weaknesses of the offensive line and accents the strengths of the offensive line.
Yes, no question. And and look, let's be honest. That's where one of my biggest question marks lies is the offensive staff going to adjust to the personnel that they have, whether that's, the offensive philosophy, getting the ball out to the wide receivers, in short passes and RPOs and things, but it's also what's the running game going to look like if you have a limited guy at right guard. I mean, that's all part of being a good coach. Yeah. And calling plays that are going to benefit your guys as opposed to calling plays because you think it's a good play on paper.
And I'll say this, I didn't like what they did last year on offense. Didn't like it at all in a lot of different ways. But one thing I will say about it, they did a good job of building around what they perceive their strengths to be.
Sure.
They perceive their strengths to be offensive line, tight ends, and running backs. And so they built an offense around that. And it was an offense that was good enough for them to get to the ACC title game, the college football playoff. Now we need to see if they can build it around a system that's more geared towards skill players. We'll have to see. But they did, I mean, like it or not, they did build around what they perceived their strengths to be last year. And after Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey got hurt, it became even more necessary to double down on that. Again, there are still things they could and should have done differently, but based on what their philosophy is of not playing freshmen and that kind of receiver, or being hesitant to play freshman receiver, I understand it. I don't like it, but at least I can see it, and I can understand what they did and why they did it. Now we got to hope that they can apply that to this year's team, and if they do, look, this is ultimately where my confidence comes from, Vince, is I do have confidence that Tommy Rees, and look, I have issues with with what Lance Taylor's doing as a recruiter right now. I don't have questions about Lance Taylor's coach. I think Lance Taylor's a very good football coach. I think John McNulty's a very good football coach. And as I've said a million times about Jeff Quinn, I don't think he's a guy that my issue was never that he's a bad coach. It's just that he's not good enough to build an elite offensive line without some circumstances working in his favor. But he's still at least a good coach, right? And even me, who's probably his harshest critic, I think he's at least a good coach. So I'm actually a little bit more confident in the staff from a coaching standpoint. I think the recruiting needs work, Vince. But from a coaching standpoint, I think this is a good group. The question is, will it be good enough to go from 10-2 to? That's why I say the floor is 10-2. I think this staff, based on what we've seen them do, is good enough to go 10-2. The question is are they going to be able to make the changes and push the right buttons in a way that allows them to take that next step? And look, we talk about newcomers. We're getting a little bit sidetracked. We talk about newcomers.
Right.
Jack Cohn and Kane Madden are key pieces to that, because now you have two very experienced players at two very important positions, replacing two very experienced players, Ian Book and then Tommy Kramer. Or if you want to go to the other side, Aaron Banks, depending on where he plays. I assume right guard. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Brian, we're talking about offensive line, and there's another newcomer, at least that we are aware of, that is going to be starting on the offensive line. And we're kind of going from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum when we talk about newcomers, and because we're talking about an incoming freshman starting at arguably the most important offensive line position on the line, and that would be left tackle. And
I would definitely say, I would not say most important. As a cornerback, I'm a big believer that there's no more important position than center.
Fair enough.
But certainly the most recognizable and prime position. It's a prime position.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The most recognizable offensive line position, no question. Which actually adds to what you're talking about, Vince, because it's a spotlight. It's the only spotlight position on the offensive line.
Yes. And if you don't tell me anything about the freshman that is going to be starting there, and you tell me that there's going to be a freshman starting at left tackle, that's going to give me pause. Yeah. And it gave me pause when we first started hearing that was going to be the situation.
If you'd have told me 4 months ago, look, Blake Taylor is my number one ranked recruit in the 2021 recruiting class.
Correct.
I graded him as a top 50 recruit, 5-star upside. I think very highly of Blake Fisher. And even then, when I first was told he was going to start as a true freshman left tackle, I thought, oh, that's not good. Just because, like you said, left tackle, as a former quarterback, the last thing I wanted to see was a rookie playing on my blind side. But then the more and more I talk to sources I trust, Ryan Harris talked about it when he and I sat down for an interview talking about Blake Fisher. Every person that I've talked to that was at practices this spring, we saw it in the blue gold game. Everybody says, yeah, he's not a freshman. He's not your typical freshman. He's a different cat. And so it gave me a little bit more reason for optimism that we saw it. And the other part too, Vince, is he didn't just do it from the standpoint of – I'm trying to think the right way to say this. A lot of times with freshmen, they'll flash and then fade, then flash, then fade. From what I'm told about Blake is he was pretty steady. The only thing that faded late in spring was his conditioning, just because it's his first time really going through it. He got a little tired. But his execution and his level of play and his focus, from what I'm told, was pretty high throughout the spring.
Well, and he is a guy that, not only would his focus and his concentration and his pickup of the offense need to be high, but from a physical standpoint, I mean, we weren't there. We couldn't. We heard things. We knew kind of how big he was. Things of that nature. But then when we started hearing guys like Ryan Harris talk about what he saw at
yes, and that's the thing is what he saw.
Yeah,
right? They were
seeing
there.
it.
We weren't there. We don't know. We can't
exactly.
see it. So we had to rely on people that did see it.
And when he comes in and we hear, okay, he's what, 6'5", 330 or whatever the measure, 6'6". Okay, yeah, big boy, right? But there's 6'6", 330, and then there's 6'6", 330. I mean, is it baby fat? Is it, you know what I mean? Like,
is he a big fat pudgy kid, or has he got a good body? And, Quentin Nelson was 340. There's other guys that weigh 340 who were fat guy couldn't move. Quentin Nelson was just huge. Blake Fisher is just big. He's not like a fat kid. He's just big.
Exactly. Just a big dude.
Broad shoulders, big hands, big head, big. I mean, he's just big.
Right.
But he's a good big. Like he doesn't look like a freshman.
And that's my point.
Thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
Does he look like he's ready to start at a high Division I, football at left tackle? I mean, that's the question, right? Doesn't matter how what your recruiting profile looks like, are you ready? Because normally, maybe 2 years down the line, you're ready to start at left tackle.
Or at least, like Quentin Nelson, hey, even Quentin Nelson redshirted as a freshman.
Exactly.
I mean, that's where I come from. You don't see freshmen. And then Robert Hainsey started as a freshman, but he was more of a rotation guy. Didn't take over till the last 4 games of the year as the starter. But even then, was still a rotation. I mean, you're saying, okay, Blake, you're the guy,
right? And you're the guy in the
tackle.
Spring. Like he made that jump in the spring. There's nobody as we sit here in July, nobody's saying, well, there's going to be a battle at left tackle, whatever. No, he solidified that in the spring. So
like a week into
tells me, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Which is a little concerning. I mean, he's good, but it also shows that, a guy like maybe Tosh Baker wasn't quite as ready as we'd hoped, even though he had a great winter from everything we were told. But, but here at the end of the day, Vince, he's going to have an impact on this football team this year. It's just, is it going to be a good impact or is it going to be a shaky impact? Because, again, you've got a quarterback who is a little prone to holding the ball a little bit long at times, not often, but at times.
True.
And then a true freshman at left tackle, that's a recipe for disaster because potentially could be with most freshmen. Now, the important thing for Blake Fisher is he's going to have to do something that's hard for freshmen to do, which is be consistent. That's going to be the key. Can you be consistent? He doesn't need to be dominant freshman. He needs to be consistent. I think it's more likely that we can predict dominance from him at times than consistency at times, just because of his youth.
That's fair.
But the point that Ryan Harris made, which is a good point, and again, he would know better than us, is he said, but when you look at a kid that's 6'6" with that kind of length and that kind of width, he can make mistakes that normal people could make. He can overcome mistakes that normal people can't overcome. If he's a second late out of his stance, if he overstrides because of his size and his powerful hands and his length, he can overcome that and rectify that mistake. Whereas if it happened to Liam Eichenberg as a redshirt sophomore when he's a first-year starter, because he wasn't quite as wide, he didn't have the length. Liam had shorter arms. That might result in him getting beat. Where Blake is so long that he can overcome that. And we saw this a little bit from Josh Lugg in 2019. Josh Lugg would make a mistake at right tackle when he took over for Hainsey. He'd be laid out of his stance or maybe underset a little bit, but he was so long that he could then recover and at least ride the guy outside. And so at least Blake brings that to the table. And that was a point that Ryan Harris made that I thought was a really good point, that, that because of that size, he's going to be able to overcome some of those mistakes, which is going to help him at the end of the day be more consistent, even though technically if I'm coaching him up and grading his film, I'll say, hey, that's a bad pass set. You got to get out there sooner. You took too wide of an angle or you took too narrow of an angle or whatever the case. But, you got it done, but we need you to execute a little bit better. But to the quarterback, it's like, well, I don't really care about that. Did I have a pocket or not? You can clean up all that other technical stuff, but did I have a pocket or not? And that's going to ultimately, at the end of the day, going to be the key for Blake Fisher. Well, and then he's not, again, he's not the only guy.
Well, and speaking of not being the only guy, the other question mark for me, who's going to start next to him? and maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on that, as to who's going to be that guy next to Blake Fisher. But it really worries me when people are saying there's going to be an all freshman left side of the line. That makes me nervous. And it's nothing against Rocco Spindler. It's nothing against Blake Fisher. It's just the fact that they're both freshmen. And I personally would feel more comfortable if there was a more veteran presence there at left guard, whether that's going to be Kane Madden, whether that's going to be, apparently Zeke Correll has an opportunity there. Depending on who that's going to be, I would prefer having somebody that has a little bit of experience, somebody that Blake Fisher can lean on mentally, when things are tough, when he's got a question, when he's not sure of what to do, things of that nature. Like, I'm not, and I also will say that I want to know whoever's going to be that left guard sooner than later. You know what I mean? So that those two can practice together a lot. And
even if it's Rocco Spindler,
who, yes,
the other freshman newcomer who could play. I think in a perfect world, Rocco doesn't start this year.
I agree.
I would love to see Rocco play.
Yes.
Even if it's not like it was in 2017 with Hainsey and Kramer, because that's not always like we always have this thing where we say, well, just rotate those guys. That worked in 2017 because of those unique players and because you had experience inside of them. You had Alex Barr as a right guard who could help them come along. That's a little harder to do if you have not necessarily as experienced of a group as they had in 2017. Because in 2017 you had 4 returning starters. It was a little different animal than 2018 when you had a lot of guys in new places. And this year is going to be similar. You have some guys that have experience, but there's really only one true returning starter in the Notre Dame offense. Even Kane Madden, who started 2.5 years at Marshall, it's at Marshall. It's not a Notre Dame. It's different offense, different terminology, different timing, different techniques, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be the question. So, like you said, it's not just so easy to say, I'll just rotate them. Yeah. That has to work, and it may not be in every other down. It may be where Rocco gets every third series. But whatever the rotation needs to be, it needs to be a consistent rotation if they're going to use it. They may not, but then do you have Rocco rotate with Kane Madden? Do you have him rotate with who the other guard is? That's going to be the question. But I expect Rocco to play this year. I do. I hope Rocco plays this year. The reality is, Rocco Spindler's not a 5-year player unless he gets hurt at some point in time. He's just not.
Right.
So there's no reason to redshirt him or not play him. It's just, okay, is he going to be more of a rotation guy? Is he going to be a guy that you get in? Maybe he's a guy that you get in for a couple series in some of those blowout games where, you don't pull the whole starters, then put him in, but maybe you put him in for a couple series with the first team offensive line just to let him get some work there. There's all types of different things you could do beyond a rotation, but I would like to see potentially him earn that rotation spot, Vince. So at the very least, that he's proven himself, and then next year he's going to be in line to step right into that Kane Madden spot, assuming Kane Madden starts this year, which, as I said earlier, they're expecting him to start, but he's going to have to win that job. If somebody beats him out, then they're going to be able to beat him out. I mean, they're going to be allowed to beat him out is what I'm trying to say, which isn't always the case.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always the case. And you figure, he came here as a graduate transfer. He was promised a starting position. I'm very happy to hear. And it's similar to the Jack Cohn conversation. I'm happy to hear that there's going to be a competition. Now, if I'm a betting man, am I putting my money on Jack Cohn and am I putting my money on Kane Madden to start? Yeah, I am. But at the same time, I'm glad to hear that there's a competition.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, me too.